Hello everyone, GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs and our favorite recurring segment, Moment of Zeneca. I am joined by the one and only Zeneca 33. We are going to talk about all things happening in NFTs and crypto this week. I hesitate there because it'll really mostly be about NFTs and not everything happening in crypto. There's too much happening for us to cover it all. But we're of course going to dive into the bear market. By the time we finish recording this podcast, ETH will probably have dropped by another few $100. So that's fun. That's the game we're playing these days of like, if I go to dinner, will ETH have crashed by the time it's over? And we will talk about Goblintown, the doxing that has happened there, drama with Celsius, other projects we're keeping our eyes on, and some general updates. Before we get to all that though, we have to hear a word from our lovely sponsors.
Living a bankless life requires taking control over your own private keys. And that's why so many in the bankless nation already have their Ledger hardware wallet. And brand new to the Ledger lineup of hardware wallets is the Ledger Nano S Plus, a huge upgrade to the world's most popular hardware wallet. With more memory and a larger screen, the Nano S Plus makes it easy to navigate and verify your transactions. And the paired Ledger Live desktop app gives you increased transparency as to what is about to happen with your NFT. What you see is what you sign. The Nano S Plus gives you the smoothest possible user experience while you're doing all of your crypto things. So go to the Ledger website to check out the features of the new Ledger Nano S Plus and join the waitlist to get yours. And don't forget about the Crypto Life card, also powered by Ledger. The CL card is a crypto debit card that hooks right into the Ledger Live app, right next to all the DeFi apps and services that you're already used to doing, like swapping tokens and staking. So if you don't have a Ledger hardware wallet, go to ledger.com, grab a Ledger, and take control over your crypto. It's increasingly obvious that everything will become tokenized, and NFT marketplaces needs robust financial reporting, performance analysis, and the peace of mind that they are compliance ready. GILDED's NFT Ops is a one-stop financial reporting solution for growing NFT platforms. GILDED has developed marketplace-specific modules to track the financial performance of NFT creators, including revenue tracking, collection metrics, royalty payments, and revenue share. Customers of NFT Ops gain full access to accounting tools and powerful APIs for custom integrations that simplify operations, streamline reporting, and produce tax-ready data. So no wonder why so many top brands like CoinMarketCap, Gitcoin, Nifty's, and POAP trust GILDED to automate complex reporting workflows. Visit gilded.finance/bankless to learn more.
All right, Zeneca, we are back. We should say it up front here, since we need to keep our livelihoods alive during this time, you should subscribe to the Overpriced JPEGs YouTube feed and go check out Zeneca's YouTube feed. Zen Academy? Is that the YouTube channel, Zeneca?
Zen Academy 333, because Zen Academy was taken by someone else. But Zen Academy on YouTube, you'll find us. Great.
Go subscribe to both. Check out all the amazing content we're putting out. And let's dive in. Zeneca, tell me how your week has been.
My week has been surprisingly good, given the catastrophic bear market and the fear and doom and gloom out there. I'm in Amsterdam at the moment for Met Amsterdam, NFT conference here. It's fun, it's wild, it's amazing. I met so many people, both from the Zen Academy community and just the wider community. And you wouldn't tell that there's a bear market. Like, there's so much excitement and exuberance, and people are happy and just connecting and networking, and like it's bustling. Yeah.
I will say conferences are the best place to be when bear markets hit, because for that exact reason, it doesn't feel like it. I was at Consensus in Texas, and I was still there Sunday night as like things were really starting to implode, and like the price of ETH had dropped to, I don't know, whatever, it dropped down to like 1,200 at that point.
Yeah.
And Celsius was freezing withdrawals, which we'll get into a little bit. And I was just surrounded by, people getting drinks in Austin from Consensus, and everyone was like, oh yeah, it happens, shit happens.
Yeah. It'll bounce back. Yeah. We've been here before.
Yeah. Do you feel, for me, when we had the first big drop, I was a little bit more rattled, and this now second wave, I feel pretty unrattled. Did you have the same experience?
100%. I've been saying so many times this week that I feel better now than I did when ETH was at 2,300. When it dropped from like 3K, 3,500 down to 2,300. I don't know. I just felt, for whatever reason, more panicked and more doom and gloom. And now, whether it's just numbness or getting used to it, or I'm just comfortable enough, whatever, it's just, yeah, I feel fine.
Are you sensing that from the Zen Academy community as well, for example?
It's a really good question. So I think, yes, I think there was definitely more like panic and doom and gloom and fear. I guess when prices tanked that first time, I think it was coincided with the war in Ukraine. So there's a lot of mixed emotions there. But now, for those who are, so I'll say this, for those who are still around, I think people are pretty happy and supportive, but there's clearly been a decline and a drop off in engagement, not just in Zen Academy, but like every Discord, on Twitter, everywhere. People are just sort of leaving the space and going, hey, you know, all right, I tried NFTs, I tried Web3, I tried crypto, it wasn't for me. Fun experiment. I lost a bunch of money. I'm going to go back to real life. And that was me in 2017, 2018 as well. But I think of the people who are staying around, and like anyone listening to this, if you're still listening to an NFT podcast in June 2022, you're like already fairly serious and you haven't left. So I think that is going to give you such an like a leg up and just be in a great position like 2 years from now. So yeah.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I think I was starting to feel like the Twitter algorithm had just identified that I mostly resonated with people who were like, gonna keep building. And so all it was feeding me was people like gonna keep building. And so it's like in my universe, everyone just feels like they're like, cool. And like, yeah, whatever. Yeah. And I felt like I feel like I may be a little bit out of touch, but I think the self-selection bias is evident. Like that first wave of the crash probably, this maybe sounds overly dismissive, but like flushed out a lot of the people who you know, maybe weren't going to stick around. And so in the second wave of the crash, anyone who stayed around past that first wave is like, well, I'm sticking around here too.
Yeah.
And frankly, I feel stabler than I've actually felt in this industry for a long time. And I think I didn't realize, but for a while there, I felt that things were overpriced. Like it felt like things were way too frothy.
It's the name of the podcast.
But I still felt that. Yeah. Yeah, I was only being like a little bit tongue in cheek when I named it this, like, you know, and it felt too frothy. So when I was buying into things, it did feel a little bit like, you know, it's really going to 20x from here? Like, not immediately. And so I now finally feel like, I feel kind of excited where I'm like, oh, I'm finally getting in at prices that feel a little bit more like, okay, I'm really going to make money on this now. Yeah. And I really wasn't feeling that for a while. So there's a little bit of relief for me as well as excitement, but I've felt conflicted about how to communicate out about it because I've worried maybe being like too jubilant like that or like all pumped. I've wanted to express that because I want people to feel reassured. Like, hey, I'm still buying ETH. I'm DCAing in. Like nothing's changed really for me. And if anything, I feel more excited, but I haven't wanted to say any of that and then been like, have that come across as like dismissive or like insensitive to people who have lost a lot and are hurting and maybe overplayed their hand a little bit. And so I haven't known how to balance that, but it feels like most of the community that's
tough
still
line
here is
to walk,
optimistic.
But yeah. I think it's good for people to hear that people are still optimistic about ETH and people are still buying NFTs and looking at it as a good buying opportunity. Because I know so many people that are just sort of either starting to deploy or getting ready to like, you know, buy a lot of stuff because prices are down so much and they still believe like in certain projects long term. And I think sort of to what you said before, it's like, it's not just people being flushed out, it's also projects being flushed out, the low effort projects, the ones that didn't have substance. And yes, it sucks and it's sad for holders of those projects, but on the flip side, it's good for the true builders, the projects that have, you know, they raised money and then they you know, sold ETH to stables and then they've kept that in a treasury and have planned out for 2 years of runway, or they've, you know, whatever, they had good business planning, so they can survive a bear market. And there are projects like that out there. So it's great to see them sort of shining a little bit more. Yeah.
So the question I always have to ask, are you buying anything right now? Got your eye on anything right now?
So honestly, the one thing I have my eye on, it's been going up in price, which is insane. But I've been really wanting to buy another The Currency by Damien Hirst because the burn date is coming up. I got one from Mint like a year ago, and I was always thinking, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna buy another one, but I'll wait for it till it dips a certain point. And I missed like, I don't know, a month or two ago when it was really low. And then so it went to like 3 ETH, I think, or maybe even a little lower. Now it's at like 6. And it's just been going up. Not actually, it's like 7.5 actually. It just keeps going up because we're getting closer to the burn date. And yeah, that's
explain for
what
folks,
I want.
The burn there is that you can choose to get a physical by Damien Hirst if you burn the
Correct.
NFT or keep the NFT and forego the physical. So he's making people.
You're
make
making
that
people
choice.
choose, yeah. I think he's actually already created 10,000 physicals. So it will either be the NFT gets burned, sent to the burn address, or they will literally burn a physical, or maybe for some
that's
eco-friendly
dramatic.
version. But yeah, it'll be like, all right, and for people like me who only have one, it's like, well, I want to keep the NFT, but I would love a physical Damien Hirst. So it's just like,
It's a real Sophie's choice.
well, yeah, it's wanting to get another one. So it's that's the one thing I've been looking at. Other than that, art blocks. It always comes back to art blocks and generative art for me.
It's so funny because you've been saying that on this pod for a while now, and I think the very first episode I did with you, like the formal interview episode we did,
right.
You broke down art blocks on the podcast, when I really joined the space, it just felt like a lot of art block stuff was already pretty expensive for me, and so I hadn't really been able to fully dive in. But I interviewed this past week at Consensus, Tyler Hobbs and Eric Snowfro were both on a panel.
Wow.
It was just a killer panel. It was Thank You X, Zeneca, All Seeing Zeneca. But of course we got into generative art, and in prepping for that panel, I was doing even more research on both Eric and Tyler and art blocks. And I get it now. I'm on the train. I want to be buying art blocks art. I totally feel like that. That's a high conviction bet that will have value in the long term here. It's to the extent that art collecting has remained a thing for the last however X many centuries since humans existed, essentially.
Right. 50,000 years ago, there were paintings on walls.
Yes.
Cave walls.
And this is this Renaissance period of generative art, and art blocks is at the very center of it. It launched it, and so it.
You get it.
I'm with you. I know.
Yeah, it's funny
I'm on the
actually.
train,
This market crash, art blocks has stayed pretty stable, and prices have even been going up. But it's because it's already crashed 95% over the last 6 months. So that basically they run out of sellers. There's just One of the things I'm gonna shill art blocks one more time because it's not a shill because I really believe in it, but it's one of those projects that the more you spend time in the space and you talk to OGs in the space or people who've been around for a while or that are. Everyone likes art blocks. It's it's the project, or generative art rather in general. It's the sort of the thing that almost everyone can. I really haven't heard a good bear case for generative art. I've heard art blocks is releasing too many projects, too much supply, curation could be better. Yeah. But if we take art blocks out of it and just look at generative art as a medium, as a new art, well, it's not new, it's been around since the 60s, but this renaissance or this revolution of generative art, this new wave ushering in, merged with blockchain technology, it's I haven't yet heard of any sort of counter argument to why it's not going to be even more massive than it is now.
Absolutely. And if anything, I think it's suppressed from a mainstream macro perspective, because I think there is a resistance people have to the idea of art that has a computer in the mix. Somehow they see that as less human art, and I think that will absolutely change, and people will really realize that all this is a tool, like a paintbrush or paint or whatever, watercolor and colored pencils. All of these things are just mediums for creating art, and the computer is the same thing. So these folks who are creating algorithms to output something and oftentimes there's a they'll kind of mix. It's a very strong mix of man and machine. That's certainly as much art as photography or anything else. And for me, I started to appreciate the craft behind Fidenzas. I was diving more into Fidenzas, having interviewed Tyler Hobbs, and so really understanding that one of the things that's so incredible about that project is, given that art blocks, you're stuck with what you get, right? There's no I'm gonna use a computer to output a ton of different options and then pick my favorites. With art blocks, once you mint one, whatever the algorithm produces, that's what you get. So there's a little bit of a roll of the dice there. So understanding then that Fidenzas has such variety in its output, while keeping the quality of each piece really high, that's a really incredible feat.
And difficult to do.
Yeah, and so when I started to understand the craft behind it, that's when you get to oh wow, this is art, and this is for sure going to have really long-standing value. So
I'm glad.
Was not on our agenda today.
Yes,
to do an art blocks debrief.
It's always on my agenda. I will always art blocks is always on my agenda.
This is Zeneca's hidden. He's just trying to red pill the world on art blocks at all times.
Seriously.
But I will say I had that click moment, so I'll probably. I mean, to your point, it hasn't like wildly dipped in this bear market.
No.
It seems like we are not the only ones who have had this thought, but
yeah. It's also, I'll say FX Hash as well is a really great place to collect generative art on the Tezos.
Which we've talked about. I can't get on Tezos. New York State,
of course, New York
has restrictions about Tezos. So I could use
crazy.
like a VPN, but if the FBI is listening, I won't do that. Okay, let's continuing in the bear markets. You're always looking at art blocks. Did you see this stat? I've seen it a couple places now that you have about 10% or up to 10% of wrapped ETH offers on OpenSea are getting accepted.
I did not see that. That sounds crazy high, but also believable.
Yeah. So to get context, people, I mean, maybe this is self-explanatory, right? But obviously, it's a bear market, so it's a buyer's market right now. So this is to say, usually in normal or call it bull times, you get an offer in wrapped ETH. I know my first reaction to that is always like, okay, that means if I want to sell this, I could get even more by just listing it
20-30%
a little bit
more
below
usually.
4, but then 20% more than my highest wrapped ETH offer. So like, I'm going to go do that. But liquidity obviously having dried up quite a bit in this bear market, folks are like, if I have an offer on something, like I just want to take the money, bird in the hand is better than two in the bush or whatever. Like I just want to take the money that's being offered to me. So if you're in a fortunate enough position to have some liquidity, obviously, talking about there's good buys out there simply because prices have dropped, but also you can start putting some offers on things, maybe lower, even below floor, and the odds of it getting accepted have just gone way up. So some strategy there for folks who are looking
honestly
to buy.
it's probably like I always say it's one of the best strategies at all times. If you're trying to if you have a limited budget or bankroll, wrap your ETH and then just make bids below floor. Eventually someone's going to accept and you'll buy a piece below floor. So now even more than ever.
Have you do you have any success stories with that personally?
No, I'm always too bad at that. I'm I guess time poor, and I just end up buying floor pieces way too often. But my friend Jamie,
I'm time poor, but ETH rich. So
well, yeah, which is now I wish I was time poor and USDC rich, but my friend Jamie, he's always making bids and succeeding tremendously at it. So it's a great strategy.
Wow. He's a true degen.
Now they have bots that can help you do that as well. So there's tools out there that can make bots on an entire collection. Or I think LooksRare has a collection bid, and I heard OpenSea just introduced collection bids, or they're introducing them. So I think that's a great way to do it.
Seaport protocol. I don't know if they might be doing some of that.
Might be in that. Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. Well, let's talk just also some things that I think really impacted the sharp decline. The Celsius withdrawal pauses, it's a cyclical thing, or it's circular, right? Which is ETH was dropping, Celsius wasn't going to be able to make margin calls, it appears. So then they pause trading, so then the ETH crashes further. I feel like these things kind of end up feeding on themselves.
It's just this cascading effect. Yeah.
Where were you? Tell me where were you when Celsius paused withdrawals, and what was your reaction?
That's a really good question. I think I would have been, I don't know. My life is so crazy. I think I was here in Amsterdam, but I remember, I think maybe I was back home. I was the night before they paused them, there was all this clearly not FUD, but this noise going around on Twitter about how the staked ETH to ETH thing there was depegging there, or quote unquote depegging. And it doesn't look good for Celsius because they have a lot of this staked ETH, and that's tying up their liquidity for the long term, and people are sort of having issues withdrawing and stuff like that. And then I read this fantastic article by Kobe, his Substack, on the whole issue, and I was like, oh, okay, I get it, it makes sense. And then the next day I heard that they were withdrawing, and I was like, oh, that's not good.
Walk me through the Kobe. I saw Kobe tweeting some things, but I didn't end up reading his article. What was the thrust of it?
Yeah, the gist of it was just so why staked ETH trades lower than the price of ETH. So for those who don't know, staked ETH is basically
STETH.
STETH is in anticipation of the ETH 2.0 merge coming up. You can sort of stake your ETH, and I think it's basically acting as a validator, so a proof of stake concept, which we're going to move to rather than proof of work, to sort of help the transition period. Again, I'm not an expert of it, but you basically lock it up. So you lock it up in a protocol. Lido, I think, is the biggest one. It has tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of ETH in this protocol. And in return for locking it up, you get some small return on investment. I don't know if it's like 6%, 8% on whatever you ETH, which is, it's not bad. But, and you deposit your ETH and you get a staked ETH, ST ETH back. And in, I think it's like a year after the merge is complete and official, something like maybe it's like 6 to 18 months is the window, you'll be able to exchange your staked ETH back for 1 ETH, 1-to-1. And in addition, you get some yield. So then people are like, well, shouldn't staked ETH always be worth 1 ETH? Why is it trading at lower? And people were like buying and selling. And I mean, there's a few reasons. One is obviously the liquidity lockup period. So, if you need liquidity now, you might be willing to pay a premium over, waiting and keeping it locked up for 18 months or even longer. But then there's other things like smart contract risk. If something goes wrong with Lido, which it seems very unlikely that it would, but, we've seen crazy things in DeFi and all sorts of stuff. So there's always some risk there. And there's a couple of other factors. And effectively the price of staked ETH kept dropping. And then some of these protocols like Celsius, which had large amounts, they, in order to sort of like cover withdrawals and pay their debts and all that kind of stuff, they were starting to sell their staked ETH at, lower and lower prices. Instead of, 1-to-1, one staked ETH to 1 ETH, they maybe said, all right, we'll take a 90%, we'll take that. And then it will get to 85%, 80%. And eventually it drops to a point where people are like, all right, I'm willing to buy, staked ETH and lock up the liquidity for 2 years till I can get the ETH back. But that's like my understanding of it. I'm not an expert, but Kobe sort of just, maybe we'll, if you can link to the article in the show notes, it's really good. And he does a much better job than me of explaining how and why it worked. And it sort of led to this whole Celsius collapse.
I think I'd seen something that Celsius was only collateralized at like 95%, right? Like they could only cover like 95% of things they had borrowed against. And, when you look at these loan opportunities, like I look at like being collateralized like 250%, 300%. So that you're in super good shape to like cover the loan if the price of ETH does start dropping. And it seems like Celsius was incredibly poorly collateralized and was not in, clearly they weren't, right? Clearly they were not in shape to handle something like this. And it's just so incredibly irresponsible. And it really frustrates me because this stuff is avoidable. This is not like inevitability. This is not just like, oh, well, it happened. Like, no, like be fiscally responsible and you don't lose people's money. And I actually have a little bit of money in Celsius at the very beginning of last year, probably like January, February, when I was starting to get into DeFi. I was looking at some of these like APYs or these yields that you can get, and I was like, oh, this is so interesting. Like this is part of what's exciting about all this stuff. And I read through a whole bunch of different wallets, Celsius, BlockFi, Nexo, like all of them, and really, I was alone, like just trying to figure out what made sense. And New York has really strict laws, so you can't use Binance in the States generally. You've got Binance US, which is totally different. So I don't know why, but I ended up going with Celsius. I put like $30 in it. It's been so trivial, but it was literally to test it out because I'm like, this feels like too good to be true that you can get these returns. I think at the time the ETH staking return was even higher too. It may have been a little bit, and so or USDC. Maybe I even staked some USDC because that was like the highest one. Was you could get like 12% APY if you're staking USDC. Anyway, just relieved, for a year, I was very consistently getting my rewards from Celsius, and I'd sort of been like, all right, this is feeling like stable, but just never felt confident enough that I like really fully understood these models to like put more in, and obviously very grateful that I didn't at this point. You also referenced that there was there were rumors about this going around. I think it was on Sunday. Monday was when they paused the withdrawals, paused the transfers, but there was this really interesting thread with, is it Alex Mashinsky? Yeah, who is the founder of Celsius, and a gentleman named Mike Dudas, Mike
Dudas, yeah.
Yeah, he tweeted, "I'm saddened by how many people are cheering on the demise of Celsius Network." This is the day before they paused.
Right.
They paused withdrawals, and he's like, "I, along with many others, counsel people not to put their funds with that risky business. However, many did, and the large number of retail folks look like they are soon to be wrecked. We all lose." And then he said, "I hope retail can get out. I've been hearing about accounts locked. That would be similar to Luna. We shall see." And Alex Mashinsky, the CEO of and founder of Celsius, replies. You didn't see this, Zeneca? I'm seeing your face. Looks like you didn't.
I don't think I saw this, but
He replies and he says to Mike, and he's like, Mike, do you know even one person who has had a problem withdrawing from Celsius?
Oh, right, I have
Widespread
seen this,
FUD
yeah,
and
yeah.
misinformation. If you are paid for this,
yeah.
then let everyone know you are picking sides. Otherwise, our job is to fight TradFi together. And then, of course, literally the next day he freezes it. So what it looks like is the CEO basically, because he must have known at that point that they were getting close to needing to freeze withdrawals. So it sounds like he's doing that basically to prevent people from panicking and withdrawing.
Yeah.
So there's enough money in the system kind of locked up before he then freezes it withdrawals. I mean, it's such a bad look.
That's so
and,
bad.
And somebody else was tweeting like, basically CEOs who like come after people who like say mean things about them on Twitter is like should be the biggest like red sign top signal.
Such a red flag.
So anyway,
Yeah, it's giving
future.
DeFi a bad name, which is a shame because it's not DeFi, it's CeFi, centralized finance.
Yeah.
It's like a hybrid. CDeFi, I guess, is maybe the best way to say it. But it's unfortunate, and it's just one in a string of like a dozen things now that have like really just been more nails in the coffin of this Ethereum thing, this whole bull market, which is clearly well and truly over now. Now it's about when are we going to bottom, and then how are things turning around from here?
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll bring regulators upon us faster, which look, I think there's a need for regulation. You just want it to be smart, and Lobby 3 is doing some things on that
Not
front.
over-regulated. Yeah.
Yeah. I just, people I don't think Congress understands the difference between an algorithmic stablecoin and, USDC backed.
Most of the people in the NFT or the Web3 space don't know the difference.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's tough.
If you're starting on your NFT journey, you need MetaMask. This is your tool to unlock the world of DeFi and NFTs without giving up custody over your private keys. MetaMask is both a secure in-browser wallet and also a secure bridge for your hardware wallet so that you can connect to any Web3 enabled website. You can now trade tokens with any DEX or aggregator. MetaMask Swap gathers real-time pricing information across the DeFi exchange ecosystem, allowing you to select your best price while getting all of the MetaMask benefits of self-custody, lower gas costs, and increased transaction success rates. MetaMask also has a fantastic mobile wallet, which I use while I'm out and about. And I use it to collect POAPs, NFTs, and use it for all my DeFi things while I'm away from home. If you haven't downloaded MetaMask, you gotta try it out. Download MetaMask for desktop and mobile at metamask.io, or load up your Ledger, Trezor, Keystone, or Lattice hardware wallets so that they too can get into Web3. RARIBLE is the NFT platform that's leading the charge into the multi-chain universe ahead of us. Available on Flow, Tezos, Polygon, and of course Ethereum, RARIBLE is the perfect place for NFT newcomers, profile picture collectors, and experienced NFT traders. RARIBLE has a variety of NFT features that set it apart from other NFT marketplaces. They have a native messaging function allowing you to DM your friends or haggle with sellers. They also have a mobile app on iOS and Android with a built-in NFT portfolio tracker tool, so you can easily check the value of your digital art portfolio. RARIBLE is built on the RARIBLE protocol, a multi-purpose, open source, and community-governed NFT protocol that helps build products and services across the NFT ecosystem, including white label marketplaces tailored to specific NFT communities. So go to rarible.com and start discovering and trading NFTs, putting in floor bids to join PFP communities, and DM with some brand new internet friends.
Okay, and then of course, before we move on to some specific projects, I gotta ask, prediction, where's the bottom here?
Ooh, well, yeah. I mean, I sort of, in my group chat, predicted the bottom at, I don't know, like 1,800 or something, so that was clearly wrong. I wasn't very, super serious about it, but yeah. Who knows, right? Absolutely no one knows. Anyone that says they know
Three-figure ETH?
I think we do see three-figure ETH. I think we do. I think we're
agree.
so close to it at this point that it's not going to take much. Just one more... this whole 3 arrows thing, if that it implodes even more than I haven't been following it closely, or one more protocol goes under or something like that, we'll get to 3 figures. And then I'd say I'm going to be extraordinarily shocked if we drop below 500, but I wouldn't be shocked if we get to 500-600. But I'm going to, I guess, to throw a prediction out there, I say we bottom at 830.
Oh, specific. I appreciate
Very
that.
specific.
I'll give folks a sense, and I retweeted this, I believe. Ryan and Sean Adams had tweeted this out. But in the last big bear market, ETH dropped 95%. Now, the expectation here is that they won't drop that far. We've talked about this before on this show, but typically as industries mature, the percentage drops become less and less each time. So ETH dropped 95% last time. Hopefully it bottoms out at 80 or 85% this time around. I was hoping it was going to be 70%. We've already blown past that, I believe. But if it were to fall 95% again, it would fall to $235, would be 95% drop from its all-time high. Like, holy shit.
So
Which
crazy.
I also say to be reassuring, not that I want to be reassured at the idea of it falling to 235, but like, if it were to, that's not unprecedented, right? Like it's bounced back from that kind of a fall before. So I don't think it'll go there. I think, we're probably looking at maybe 85%, and I'd have to do fast math in my head to know what that number is. But I agree. We'll hit six figures. I was listening to an old clip where I was like, it feels like it's going to get worse. Like I was saying, I think it's going to get worse. And it's like this lovely clip. I'm like, I should clip this and show how prescient I am. Because I'm like, it's gonna. And then at the very end, I'm like, but not ETH. Like, everything's going to get worse. But I feel like ETH is, bouncing along the bottom at 1,500.
I think we were all bullish on ETH like this year, like, coming into the merge. Just like a lot of people I spoke to were like, I'm going to sell NFTs. I'm going to stack ETH. I think ETH is going to do well.
Yes.
And
I was like NFTs. I think we've got more pain to come. Equities, more pain to come. Like all of this, but I was like ETH. All right, 1,500, 1,300. Well, so I was like, well, not clipping that. That doesn't make me look good. Anyway, truthfully, I'm not shocked. I think I'd mentioned to you, Michael Burry had said something about equities could fall another 65% and still be within like historical norms. So I really haven't been. The idea that we would have like more pain on that side was not altogether shocking to me. Again, I thought ETH was going to stay stronger than it has, but not worried. Bullish long term. Continuing to stack my ETH. Okay, some specific projects. Goblintown, of course. Goblintown is the project you have to talk about every week. Doxxed, very cool. The team behind Illuminati NFT, and which is like the truth, is like the umbrella org for that. Alex, one of the co-founders, also co-founded a company called Upstream that does some cool things, and I have a good friend who works there. So really excited for them. What was your reaction to the doxing news?
So crazy. So I was here in Amsterdam, and Emily, who's part of the Zen Academy team, works for Mucking. Her fiance is like part of the Goblin team, and she knows the Illuminati people. So we were at like a group dinner, and she was telling us, and our minds were just being blown. And there was a lot of like, you didn't tell us, why couldn't you tell us? All that kind of stuff. She was one of the people who like mentioned Goblins to me, like, whenever they first minted, but it was just like one out of 5 people where like I saw it in Zen Academy, I saw it in Proof. She messaged me and she was like, what do you think of free mints? And it was like, that was it. And I was like, seems cool, website's cool, let me get some. Yeah, what a reveal. I'm not surprised that it's not Yuga. What do I owe? Like 18 or something? Yeah.
That's great.
It's been a very fortunate project for me. People always say like, how did you know? I was like, I did not know. I have, if you look at my wallet, I've got like 100 of all these other projects that went to zero, but eventually, these meme projects, you just need one to sort of pay off, to take off, and then it sort of covers all the rest.
You were saying you're not surprised it's not Yuga.
I'm not surprised it's not Yuga. I mean, I think, it would have shocked me so much to hear it was Yuga. It doesn't seem like them. It doesn't seem like the MO or playbook. What about you? What did you think about the reveal?
Well, my first reaction was, fuck. I was supposed to go to a dinner with that team at South by Southwest. And if the audience will indulge me just for a minute while I say, I was in Austin. I was like, I quickly run out to buy a shirt, like to buy like it, because I didn't have like a nice professional outfit or whatever. And my phone just, literally my service dropped. Like my phone would still work, but like there was no service and there was no internet. So I couldn't get online, which makes no sense because I'm in the middle of Austin. To the point that I like borrowed somebody's phone and called my now fiance, and he just called me an Uber to a dinner he was at. I was supposed to go into a dinner with like what is now the Goblintown team. I think it was like Illuminati. Maybe it was an Upstream. It was one of the companies connected to like Alex and Truth and them. And so I RSVP'd to go to it, and then ended up at this other dinner because my phone had kaputzed. And then when my phone came back online, I was like, oh, I'm already gonna be late to this dinner. I'm at this other one. Like, I'm just not gonna make it. And I feel terrible. And I emailed them after and was like, I'm so sorry. Like, I had this other kind of commitment that I was supposed to maybe be at on my phone. But I'm like, damn it, I've burned a bridge with the Goblintown team. Hopefully it wasn't.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a real bridge. And
I don't think so.
I'm excited for them. I think, Alex has been building, and I know there's others, but he's just the one that I know best, has been building in a variety of ways for years now. And it's cool to see a payoff like this. And, definitely makes me bullish. I think they're awesome people. And so it's cool to see awesome people being behind something that you like.
It's glad it's not Zagabond.
Yeah, I know. And it's people without baggage. I mean, who knows? I don't know their intimate history, but again, like really good sense of them. And I have, as I mentioned, a friend who's worked for Upstream and has worked for Alex for probably almost a year now, and has always spoken really highly of him. And so he strikes me as a high integrity person, which is just great, because with these undoxed teams, we've had such a mixed bag in the reveals. Before. Absolutely. So let me ask you this. So, the price is down to about 3 ETH. I think peak it had hit more like 7, 8. It had gotten up. Did it pump at all after the reveal of the team?
No.
Or
so
it's just sort of stayed stagnant?
It dropped, actually. It was like 5-ish, maybe a bit over 5 before. And then it sort of dropped down around 3, where it's mostly stayed. But the price of Illuminati has gone up, because I think that they mentioned that. So when they launched, they kept 1,000 back, and they were like, we're going to raffle it off to our community or our DAO. I don't really know how it works. There's 2 Illuminati tokens. There's like the big collection, and there's, I think, something called the 178 or 187, and that has like a 12 ETH. I don't really understand that whole ecosystem, but that pumped, but then Goblins dropped. So I think it makes some sense that when you eliminate like the speculation element, and people aren't now buying Goblins because they think it's Yuga, or they think it's Beeple, or they think it's this, that, the other, that takes away some of the price generally. The speculation was baked in. And then it comes down to like what people think of the actual team, and I think probably a lot of people don't know, like me as well. It's like I kind of know them. I know a little bit about them, but I think I even have some of the basic Illuminati things, but I don't understand it, so I don't know the people behind it very well. So it's not like, I think a lot of people are like having to do research and being like, all right, so what kind of team is this? What are they going to do? What are they saying? I think they came out and said that there's no roadmap, so they still don't have a roadmap, which I like. I don't like roadmaps, but it does make it an interesting idea. Then it's like, well, where's the value going to come from? This is fully a meme project, or fully a community thing? Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I've said this a number of times in this podcast, which is this space rewards like vagueness and punishes specificity, because vagueness leaves room for the imagination to say it could be this or it could be that, and that's true. I usually mean that in the sense of like, hey, I'm specifically a project that's building an animation studio that's going to, reward holders, like whatever, that's specific. And those projects don't get priced as high as a project that's like, I mean, Azuki, for example, like kind of vague. What could it be? Like, and in this case, I think we're seeing it again, like the vagueness of who's the team, like allows the price to pump, and then the specificity of like, here's a team, here's the team is like, okay, we can't just like speculate and let our imaginations go crazy. So that totally tracks to patterns that we've seen. Yes, they've said still no roadmap. My favorite part, you love the no roadmap thing. I love the no Discord thing. I'm like, hell yes, stick it to Discord. So they're saying they're still not going to have a Discord. But they have said they're coming out with merch at NFT NYC. And I believe they're partnering with Fuocious for a party at NFT NYC.
Yeah, I saw something like that. Yeah. And I think they have a food truck.
So, I think
going around with
a food truck.
Yeah.
Like it's a very cool brand.
Because they did the Goblin Burger drop. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a cool brand, so it'll be very interesting to see where they take it, again, without a roadmap, but just building and having fun and playing, and they've got the CCO component, which I know you love. So we'll see where it lands. Okay, the maybe last thing I want to talk about, or maybe we'll tack on a couple things at the end here. Nickelodeon has announced they're launching NFTs this summer, and I want to get on my soapbox here, my John Rogers-sized soapbox. They are launching with Recur, which we've seen, a number of these sort of franchise IP stuff do, Star Trek, I think Top Gun, and it feels like these projects, I'm a little bit bearish. Like they don't seem to be nailing it. These just like franchise entrants coming into the space, and I talk about this all the time with John, who's, for people who haven't heard him on the show before, I've had him on a couple times. He was the head of franchise at Disney for a decade. And I want to give a little context here. Again, I apologize. This is going to be a bit of a soapbox, but I think it's educational. So I believe I've said this in the podcast before, but I think it was in like one episode, so you may have missed it, which is Disney was like the number 4 studio. If you look at Warner Brothers and all these different studios that are out there, Disney was like in the top, but wasn't like the top for decades. And then basically in like the early to mid 2000s really catapulted to being number 1. I may not have these numbers precise, but the general arc of the story is correct here. And really that happened under Bob Iger because he made this transition to franchise IP. That's when they bought Pixar, they bought Star Wars. He really doubled down and totally reformulated the Disney business to be built around these franchise stories, and that paid off huge for them. And John was brought on as the first head of franchise. That wasn't a role within these big studios before, and his job was to think strategically and from a business perspective about, okay, for these franchises, how do we make them last? So like Pirates of the Caribbean as an example, forget the Johnny Depp stuff that sort of complicated that franchise in years since, right? It was like, we're going to say no to some business deals. When Pirates of the Caribbean is at its absolute peak, we're not going to burn it out and take every deal we can. This was John's role to decide. He's like, we want to think about this in a long term, because in a decade, we may want to revise this franchise and do something new with it again. And we can keep bringing these franchises back in authentic ways. But if we've burned them because we just monetize them to the absolute max in the short term here, that's not going to work. So that's why I love talking to John about this space, because he's able to bring such an interesting perspective to things. And he's a big proponent of some of these big studios, and they may never get there, but like the smart strategy is to, like with franchise, like to reformulate the business around this like multi-medium style content, where you're going to have people who are like, they're going to have an NFT in their wallet, and then something's going to happen in the TV show, and that's going to affect what's happening to the NFT in their wallet. And this way where we're going to enter a new world like that. And that these studios have just not freaking figured it out yet. And Nickelodeon's owned by Paramount, and they've done a couple of these drops where they clearly are not seeing NFTs as that kind of an opportunity. And they are seeing it fundamentally as like, let's get quick cash on something and issue these NFTs where the art is frankly maybe kind of mediocre. The effort in it doesn't feel high. It doesn't feel like it's tied to a really bigger picture strategy. And he really is like, I don't think they're ever going to get it. And the final piece on this long rant that people are hopefully enjoying, because again, John is just so smart, is he's like, it feels to me like they're doing what they did with 3D movies. And he's like, Avatar came out, and it was the biggest thing, right? James Cameron, huge movie. And he was like, Avatar was shot in 3D. So it was shot to be made for 3D, and people loved it. And then what happened was the studios wanted the quick cash grabs. And so they started shooting movies for 2D because it was cheaper and easier. But then in post, like making them 3D because they could charge the audience more. And it very quickly killed 3D because audiences are smart, and it wasn't a very good experience because it wasn't actually shot for 3D. And it like kind of killed 3D off. And now you don't see 3D films
at all,
because you just started to have this kind of negative impression of it because it didn't feel that special, and you're being charged more. And they weren't willing. And he's like, I feel like they're going to do the same thing with NFTs, which is they're going to burn people out on these licensing deals they're doing. They're not publishing them themselves. They're not really like investing in them themselves. They're licensing out to these other platforms. And people are going to be able to smell that, and it's just going to feel kind of cheap and money grabby, and they're going to burn people out. Okay, again, I've stolen most of that from John Rogers, but I think I really agree, and I just wish more people were thinking about it and like paying attention, because I do think there's such an opportunity and we're missing. And like John's like, don't do your Looney Tunes NFTs yet. Like that's an incredible property and franchise. Yeah. Like wait, learn. And in 3 years, when the mainstream market is more ready and your fan base is more ready and people understand there's more and there's more wallets out there, then do it, and do it really interestingly. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. And another thing that John mentioned to me once is that you only get to launch NFTs once as one of these. You will only ever get one opportunity as at your first launch of NFTs, and it makes so much sense to do it right and wait. And yeah, I think to his point, most of these big studios, they're not doing that at the moment, and it sucks because like you said, it's going to burn people out and give NFTs a bad rep, and I think that's why it's probably going to delay mainstream adoption. It's going to be a while. Maybe I'm pretty sure that we have to change the name away from NFTs to something else before it goes mainstream. Digital collectibles, digital assets. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, we'll have to change that name exactly to get the stink off of it.
Yeah.
Well, along these lines, I will say Feature.io launched their marketplace I don't think it's like the fully end version of it, but Feature, for those who don't know, they have this like licensing marketplace that Coinbase used for when they cast the Bored Apes in their trilogy.
Oh, right.
Feature's marketplace was the one they used to like cast apes and then, seamlessly pay out the ape holders. And I've had them on the show. I'm really bullish on them. I met with Steven, who's one of the co-founders at Consensus in Texas this past week. And I have to say, I think they're like really ahead of the curve. They have some really interesting things that are coming out. And they're an example of people who I think are really thinking about it correctly when it comes to like IP and storytelling and they're also building tooling for that. So their marketplace that Coinbase used is now live. I think they're only supporting a few projects right now, and eventually they'll support more. But World of Women is one of the projects they're supporting. And so on the positive note when it comes to IP and NFTs.
Nice.
Last thing, Seth Green got his ape back. We've been tracking that story a little bit. He paid like $300,000 from the person who bought it from the thief in order to get his ape back, so he'll be able to move forward with his movie. And Bill Gates, let's just end with Bill Gates coming out and saying that NFTs are fully built on the Greater Fool scheme.
Greater Fool's theory, yeah. It's just a real shame to hear from him because I think, say what you want about him. I think he's smart. He's got a lot of...
He's brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. For him to say that, I don't know. I mean, there's certainly elements of truth to it, 100%. There's so much that happens within the NFT and the crypto space that really is just, people trying to find other people to be their exit liquidity and it's exactly as he says, but he's really throwing the baby out with the bathwater if he says it's all that. And I just hope I really think it's like ignorance and he hasn't looked into the complexities and depth of it, because I really believe that if he did and if he understood the tech, he's very, he's a tech-minded person and took that time, then I can't imagine him not believing in the tech again. But he's right. Like for 90% of the space, it really is based on that Greater Fool's theory, and it's just like people are like, all right, well, I'm gonna buy this, and now I'm gonna pump it, and then I'm gonna find someone else to pay more, and then I'll sell, and then flip it. And there's a lot of truth to that, but just a shame. Yeah.
This is what surprised me so much about it was such a surface level take. Like he's 100% right. If you're somebody who hasn't looked into this space at all, that's exactly what this is, right? Because all of the there's so much surface level stuff that is exactly that. So that's very Ponzi and just Greater Fool and whatever. What surprised me so much about this was I love Warren Buffett. I've talked about that on the show. Warren and Bill are like very good friends. Warren and Charlie Munger, are very vocally against like Bitcoin and crypto and NFTs and think it's all stupid. And I'm not surprised when it comes to them because they also didn't get into tech, right? Like they weren't into internet stocks. Like they just were like, we just don't understand this value prop and we don't know how to so we're not going to invest in it and whatever. So I'm like, okay, Warren's like not into crypto, not surprising. He hasn't looked into it. He's a consumer goods investor. Right. He's not a tech investor. Bill Gates is a tech guy. Like I'm sure he understands blockchain. And so I was just really surprised to see this. A piece of me almost wonders if he's really just trying to protect consumers and is really just worried that fundamentally most like retailers are not going to be able, aren't going to have the time or bandwidth or whatever to like really dig deep. And so he's sort of saying this to get retailers from just kind of buying in wantonly and losing a bunch of money, because the reality is a lot of that has happened. There are a lot of people, whether it was GameStop trading or NFTs and crypto, who have been wrecked. And so I almost felt like that was his motivation, because it's really hard for me to imagine that he doesn't understand the underlying tech here, or that there's something interesting going on with the underlying tech.
It definitely seems off-brand to me, for sure. Maybe he's doing that. Maybe it's an ends justify the means situation.
Who knows? All right. Well, on that note, Zeneca, thank you so much, as always, for joining us. We'll be back in a couple weeks, still K-money building here during the bear market that is probably slated to last for quite a while and have some more pain in it. But we will still be here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.